Welcome to Busted Speakers, I'm Alex.
And I'm Ed.
And today we're reviewing the fifth studio album by Charli XCX, How I'm Feeling Now. Now this is a surprise. I mean, it's not even 9 months after her self-titled from 2019, right?
Yeah, it feels like just a few months ago to me.
Yeah, because we only talked about it a few months ago in that roundup video of stuff we covered at the end of 2019.
Mm-hmm. Some very mixed thoughts back then, if I recall correctly, that I pretty much mostly still stand by.
Yeah, there's definitely some stellar highlights from Charli, but overall, at that point, I was thinking, okay, her next album, probably 2021, earliest.
Yeah.
I feel like that was fair enough to assume.
Yeah.
Now, under normal circumstances, none of these songs should exist. And the exceptional, crazy thing is, out of the unfortunate circumstances of the lockdown, they exist. I mean, I don't know if any of these songs were worked upon before lockdown. I mean, it's fair enough to say because it's an intrinsic part of why this album exists now. How I'm Feeling Now is an album that reflects the title. These are songs that she composed somehow with creative people and producers remotely, right?
Yeah. And also, additionally, she would have conference calls with her fans on Instagram Live where people would tune into her on Instagram and suggest ideas and help refine these songs in small ways, which is really cool as well. I think while maybe some of these songs were possibly floating around before the premise of this album was decided upon and when she publicly posted the contract that specified that she would have complete creative control over this one, which gave me war flashbacks to the whole situation with her Charli album where, I don't know if you remember, but she had an entire other album called XCX World that had to be scrapped because of just a bunch of label bullshit, basically, without getting into it too much.
And that was like her primary song output of 2018, right?
Yeah. And in case anyone listening didn't listen to our 2019 roundup video, I mean, it was a very lengthy one, so I don't blame you. I thought Charli was an album that was kind of had this veneer of experimentalism in the production that was kind of just masking these very mid-pop songs, in my opinion. There was definitely highlights and standouts on it, but it was filled to the brim with features that, you know, fit in on the album, but kind of distracted from Charli's own personality, at least compared to the mixtape releases she did before that, Pop 2 and Number One Angel, which I prefer to Charli. But comparatively, this album has not a single feature on it. It's almost like, in many ways, it's kind of the polar opposite of Charli, which I thought was really interesting.
That album was called that, but it was also a lot more people on it. This one probably deserves the title Charli more than anything else.
Yeah.
I'm just amazed at how good this is, because most of it was done in 1 month, right?
Yeah, what I was going to say was, while maybe stuff was conceived for this album before that period, it was 1 month that it took to make this, and I honestly cannot believe that's the case, because I think this is her best album, to be honest. This is my favourite release from Charli overall.
Including the 2 mixtapes.
Including those, yeah.
Because when I said 5th studio album earlier, I did mean, is it actually 4th?
I mean, it depends if you want to count her debut, which she's sort of swept under the rug a little bit, 14, back from 2008.
Yeah.
But if you're counting it from True Romance, this is, I'd say, the 4th studio album. But of course, she did have those 2 great mixtapes, which you could classify as just as major as something like Charli or Sucker. And
there's also the Vroom Vroom EP, which we should not forget about.
Very true.
The easiest way to summarise this is, it's a whole load of banners.
Yeah, I mean, I think this album delivers on that front a lot more than Charli did, but it also delivers on the personal front and the emotional front a hell of a lot more as well. It feels like a lot of concessions were made on the Charli album that prevented her from fully executing the vision that she was trying to on that record. And like you said, this could arguably be more fitting of the title of her own name than Charli was, because I mean, we have the title How I'm Feeling Now, which is, of course, addressing herself, so it's kind of the same deal, and it's a perfect title for this album, considering the context, because it's literally about how she's feeling now. I don't want to get into this too much, because it's been a bit of kind of agonizing discourse to witness, but people have been labeling this as a quarantine album without really divulging what exactly that means. I think there's music being made now in similar circumstances to this that is addressing the whole lockdown situation in a much more aggressive and also political way. I don't think this is a political album in the slightest. I think this is strictly about individual personal feelings. It's about how Charli's feeling. It's about feelings that are perfectly valid in the situation we're in. And seeing people describe this album as kind of petty was really disheartening to see, because she's a human being just like everyone else. And it's not meant to be a political statement, if you get me, but I feel like a lot of people are going into it kind of expecting that or subconsciously seeing it that way. And I just think it's a really strange criticism that I just think doesn't apply.
It's called How I'm Feeling Now.
Yeah.
It's all personal songs that refer to her and her own experience with this, and that's all people should expect from it.
Yeah.
There's a reason why she titled it that. I mean, what would she be doing right now? She'd probably be touring the Charli 2019 album.
That's true, that's true.
In a normal circumstance. These songs shouldn't really exist. Maybe a couple of them were developed somewhat late last year or early this year, but this is like a weird alternate universe where suddenly we have this album under a year after the one before, and it's also way more experimental, creative, and personal than that one.
It's a lot more raw and rough around the edges as well. Like, it doesn't feel as though it was as mulled over as the Charli album. Don't get me wrong, that album feels a lot more expensive in its production, and of course there's a lot more tracks on that album than the 11 tracks we got here, but by the same measure, it's so much more focused on just this concept that appeals to me more. And like you said, it's just straight bangers pretty much all the way through.
Yep.
Like, a great chunk of this album is some of her best material ever. And overall, as a cohesive piece of work, it stands above mixtapes like Pop 2, which I do really, really like, mainly because it's just so much more focused. Because Pop 2, as great and experimental and interesting and wacky as that EP was, probably the peak of her PC music stuff from the time, a lot of features on it were complete duds in my mind. There were a few tracks that were duds and just distracted from it, and it didn't have as much of a concept as this album does. So even though this is really rough around the edges compared to Charli, it actually suits the album in a way that benefits it and enhances it, I think.
Definitely.
The list of personnel involved in this album is excellent as well. You've got the likes of Dylan Brady from 100 Gex producing a few tracks here, and co-producing a track with Danielle Hall, who also worked on a great deal of PC music material that we love. Is PC music still a thing? I feel like I've asked this on another review. I'm just very confused as to what the situation is with them right now.
I mean, the people from PC music are still working in a myriad of ways.
Yeah.
Obviously.
I
don't know if it's exactly a label anymore, but I guess it's still a sort of scene, or there's still stuff like this that have been spawned off of it.
Yeah.
But I'm not entirely sure there, really.
There was a release earlier this year on PC Music by, what are they called now? Planet 1999, a little EP. Yeah. Didn't care for it, though. I just feel like they've not really been making waves in the sense of releasing a ton of stuff under their own label. It's more that these PC music artists or PC music artists that were formerly on the label, or just artists that are adjacent to PC music, because Charli herself has never been signed to the label, it's worth noting, but she has become intrinsically involved with them and continues to work with A.G. Cook as in an executive producer role, and he produced a great deal of the material here as well. Umru as well, just a great set of producers that she reached out to make this album happen.
It's great that she reached out to these people, because, I mean, their lives would have been completely put on hold too, so they were probably really happy to be working on something like this.
Yeah. Shall we go into some favourite tracks?
The two most obviously acclaimed songs are probably Forever and Claws, and that's fair enough, because I think they are two of the catchiest songs of the year, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the two lead singles from the album, if I recall correctly.
You could hear those and instantly think, how does she have songs this good, this daring, this out there already? I mean, some of these were out like 2 weeks into the album cycle, or recording cycle. Like, she was still making a lot of it, and Forever was out, right?
Yeah, I think Forever dropped literally the week after she announced this and was conceived in that time, which is unbelievable because
That is unbelievable.
I think Forever actually might be her best song just in general, to be honest.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, when you really think about it, it really just might be. I mean, you've got stuff like Vroom Vroom. The song itself is really good.
Yeah.
Stuff like Track 10.
Yeah, or Backseat as well, I suppose.
Backseat, yeah.
But
These all
again,
from
it
Top 2.
it ties back to this thing of this album has so much more of an emotional conceit to it, and a song like Forever is just so much more resonant and just the perfect pop song for these times that we're sadly stuck in. And
Yeah.
it's a song that initially I really liked it, and revisited it a few times coming up to the release of the album, but having heard the album itself and how successfully she executes just putting across her frame of mind in the form of these sort of agonized party songs, it's the best way I can describe it. It almost sort of brought me to tears listening to it, really, because it's just kind of the biggest and saddest song on the album, but also one of the most anthemic.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if there's ever a song that deserves to be the anthem or the song of the lockdown, it is that, to be honest.
Yeah.
Definitely not that Stuck With You shite that Justin or Ariana put out.
Oh, Jesus. Definitely not the Imagine cover either. Fuck me.
Oh, no. It's the second time we've mentioned that.
Yeah.
So, even though I mentioned them, I just mentioned them because they're probably two of the most obvious favourites. My favourite is actually Anthems.
Yeah.
Now, that along with Visions, which is probably a lesser second favourite, I feel like Anthems is the biggest banner here. It definitely has the most exciting instrumentation, but then you contrast that with the lyrical theme of the song, which is probably the most clear-cut lyric about how she's feeling right now.
Mm-hmm.
She talks very specifically about, binging TV shows, being bored, alone, but it sounds like a club banner with laser-pointed synth sounds that are just crazy.
Yeah.
And then, the whole, finally, when it's over, we might be even closer. That line really got to me.
Yeah. Another line as well that was, scarily, accurate and a bit of a bruh moment was, I just want to go to parties. I just want to feel the heat from all the bodies.
That's something people are not going to feel for a long time.
Yeah, imagine if this came out last year without the context that surrounds the album. It'd just sound like a sort of somewhat aggressive party tune, but in context, it sounds like this emotional outburst in a way.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's like the sound of the song is what she wants right now.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
But she can't have it. It's like she's manifested it out of her own inner core, contrasted with these lyrics of being alone. I'm not saying it's just the best song because of the contrast lyrically to musically, but I don't know, there's something about that to me.
Yeah, I think that kind of summarizes why I love the entire album so much, because it's an album that definitely goes into the darker side of her emotional state, much more so than anything else she's ever released. This is her most personal album, hands down.
For sure.
And that includes those mixtapes and EPs as well. It's just her most emotional release. But I think the fact that Anthems is the second to last track here is perfect, because I feel like the album builds up this nervous, agonized, just manic sense of desperation to break out of this situation we're in. And then finally, when it gets to track 10, there's the cathartic moment, the explosive moment of, as she says at the beginning of the track, she just shouts, "I'm so fucking bored" at the beginning, which is great. the album as a whole has an amazing flow to it, considering it was made in a month. I think this has a better track-to-track progression than Charlie did, or any of her other
We're just gonna
releases, really. I don't want to keep
we're just
comparing
gonna
it to Charlie,
brag.
but, you know.
I mean, that's what we've ended up doing.
Yeah, I suppose, but it's indicative of how just good this album is, because, you know, I'm not just praising it because it was made in a month. This could have been made in a year and I'd still like it just as much. But
That's true as well.
yeah, it's just essential for our times if you're into slightly left field pop music.
This is exactly what we need right now.
Hmm.
I guess those are my favourites, but I wouldn't say there's anything that's not good on here at all. I think we might have a discussion in a little while about one song that I like a lot, but I don't believe Ed does. We'll get to that.
Is that I Finally Understand?
It is indeed.
Yeah, it's the only track that I think is just kind of okay on here. It has an interesting two-step rhythm to it that I haven't really heard on any other Charli XCX songs, but I just don't think it goes far enough with it. I think it ends up sounding a little bit hollow.
Do you think it needed more time to establish something, or do you think it's as good as it could be as is? I think it is the shortest song other than Pink Diamond.
I think it's the track on the album that leaves the least significant impression on me. I mean, it has this self-reflective theme to it that comes across and is also on a lot of other tracks here. But I don't know, it just doesn't go that deep into it. And that's not to say that this is as deeply lyrical as, you know, a great deal of other releases. It's still very much a pop album at its core, with a focus on just having tight, punchy lyrics that are understandable on a surface level. And there's no pretense there. That's what she's going for, and she succeeds in it. But I'd say I Finally Understand is a track where there's just not enough going on ideas-wise, musically or lyrically, to really compel me to listen to it.
And it was the third single, so it might have thrown you off.
Yeah, I was disappointed when it initially dropped, and it's not really grown on me since, but I'm happy to say it's the only real dud on here for me. There's elements of other songs like Enemy and 7 Years that I'm not in love with, but I still like those songs overall. I like what they bring to the table in terms of the concept of this album.
I'm probably going to pick up a lot of flack for this, but sometimes I think she goes a bit too far with how full on she sings, and some of the like vocal editing manipulation is a bit much on a lot of songs.
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, I've kind of always felt that way about her music, though, honestly.
Like, it doesn't feel good to say this, but sometimes, and no, I've felt this way about her for a while, is that sometimes she just sings a little bit too bratty.
Yeah.
And some songs on here feel like that. I feel like this is just, sometimes I just want ordinary, straight-laced singing, especially rather than some like vocal glitchy acrobatics, which are on a lot of other songs.
Pitch shifting.
Sometimes I don't mind
that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes I don't mind that when the song is inherently catchy and interesting in of itself. But, you know, you get a song like I Finally Understand, it's easier for me to understand it.
Yeah, I guess it's the track that doesn't really do any of that stuff that you just mentioned, so I understand.
Which is a negative for you, but I guess it's a positive for me.
Yeah.
By the same token. I just feel like it has a really propulsive, fast-paced, you said two-step, I guess it's that, instrumental. I just feel like it goes.
Yeah, I think the vocal editing on this album and a lot of the others can be in danger of having this overly mechanical, overly processed vibe to it that makes her feel a little bit detached from her own material. But it's only something I feel on very few occasions on this album. Like I mentioned before, Enemy and 7 Years, I think, have some aspects of them that I don't like, and those aspects are to do with the vocals. 7 Years is at risk of being a little bit overbearing in the chorus, but by the same measure, it's a pretty emotionally charged song, and I think it succeeds in that regard.
That's true. It's definitely way better than that 7 Years by Lucas Graham.
Oh man, I forgot about that song. Thanks for reminding me of that. But yeah, just to go into that one quickly, it's a nice reflection on the past 7 years of her career since she, you know, properly started with her first material that people knew her for back in 2013 all the old Witch House stuff for the OGs who remember. But
before Boom Clap
yeah,
the next year.
it feels nice to listen to as someone who's been listening to her music for maybe 5 or 6 years. I can't tell if she's addressing her audience or addressing a partner, a romantic partner. It kind of feels like it doubles as both in a way.
Yeah.
Like she says, without the holy matrimony, she's the wife. And I don't know, it kind of is quite sweet in how it reflects her relationship with her fans, who she just so desperately wants to be with in that live setting right now.
That 7 years is really a song that would not exist other than right now.
Yeah.
Like, she has a time to reflect back on what she's done in the last 7 years, quite crucially. It's definitely a very notable song because of that. And I know it's very emotionally charged, but this is the one that suffers the most from over-sinning to me. So I can appreciate it to some level, but it is one of my lesser favourites on the album.
It's not something I'd listen to all day, that's for sure. But if I'm listening to the
No.
album, it's a really solid track. Like, I enjoy it as a part of the track list. But on the other end of the spectrum, is it just me who has been listening to Claws non-stop since it released? Just constantly? Or
I can absolutely see why.
I love Dylan Brady's hyperactive production on that track. I love the sweet melodies and Charlie's, vocal affectations and the way that they're edited on that track. I love it. I love the "I Like Everything About You" chorus and how it slowly shifts up in pitch and shifts down in pitch. It's just got a lot of personality to it, and it really works for me.
It really works on that one. I think that the vocal bending / manipulation actually makes that song a lot catchier than it would be otherwise.
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah. I agree.
Yeah, that's pretty much neck and neck with Forever as just one of the best songs on here. I actually feel like this album helped me appreciate repetition to a point of effectiveness than of any album. Like, you could say I don't know how you call it, Click 2.0, C 2.0,
Yeah.
or Clique. That's the thing, she talks about her clique like a group of friends, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Like a clique.
it serves as a sequel to the track from her album last year, right? And
that's why
reincorporates a lot of elements from that song into something new.
Yeah, that's why it's 2.0, I
Yeah.
guess, because it's another song called Click.
It's very clever, I think, because it's taking the exact same premise but applying it to the lockdown situation where she's, like I was saying before, in utter desperation to be with her clique and to see her friends. But I love how it's kind of like this elaborate remix of the original as well. I actually enjoy this song a hell of a lot more than the original track. Honestly, it's one of my favorites here.
The way the heavily repetitive click, 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 click...
It's hypnotic.
Yeah, it's hypnotic, and that's the thing. Repetition to a certain point will become hypnotic, and it really did there. And the way that the melodies come out of the repetition, I think that's one of the best parts of the album. That is genius.
Yeah. When it first went into that part, I was a bit like, oh, where is this going? But then these synths come in, and it just all, no pun intended, just clicks into place, and it sounds fantastic. And I love Charlie's verse.
I think that pun was intended.
Maybe it was, but regardless, I love the verse at the end of this song. I don't know if you remember it, but it's probably one of my favourite verses on the entire album, probably one of my favourite verses she's ever done, where she just very concisely sums up her state of mind in terms of missing her friends in the situation we're in. And it's very catchy.
Note that. I noted that it was recounting specific memories of friends that she misses and doesn't have direct physical contact with right now, or it's different. It's definitely different.
I think before we summarise our thoughts fully, we can't talk tracks without talking about the opener, Pink Diamond, which is the sort of agonised manic desperation party vibe of the album is just full force dropped on top of you with this opening track. It's only 2 minutes long, but it's just this brutal deconstructed club banger that just lops you right in the face. If you were to listen to Charlie and then immediately move on to this album, it's such a huge left hook that it might give you a serious case of whiplash. But
The
Yeah.
first track on Charlie is called Next Level Charlie. No, Pink Diamond is Next Level Charlie.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
This is like a bite-sized mission statement representation of the
Mhm.
album, so it does serve as a bit of an intro, but I did not know how many times I wanted to hear I Just Want to Go Real Hard, Pink Diamond in the Dark, until I heard this song.
Yeah. Well, it's a simple lyric, and it's a lyric that, again, if this had come out of this context, it would just be a typical Charlie lyric. But in this context, it feels like just this serious, agonized outcry, just a cry for help, basically. I mean, Charlie's
Basically.
characterized herself, not even characterized herself, she just loves going to parties and stuff like that, which is cool.
Yeah.
And she puts a lot of that and a lot of her personality into her music. And here, more than ever, it is done in a really interesting way. And right off the bat with Pink Diamond, it's not even going to ease you into those feelings. It's just going to ram them right into your ear holes. And I can't say that I have a problem with that because it's an absolute banger of a song.
It really is. When I first heard that, I was like, whoa, we've got an album on our hands here. And we certainly do. She talked about how she likes to party a lot. That's just something she likes to do. You got the song Party for You. There's a bit, a minute and a half in, where she suddenly sings very fast. That is unbelievable. Sometimes I like forget it's there, and then I'm just blown away by it again.
That little bridge.
I don't know if you're too impressed by that bit.
I liked it.
I wouldn't say it's rapped, but it's definitely like the most fast-paced singing I've ever heard her do.
It's a very interesting track, Party for You, because I think lyrically it does stumble a fair bit more than most of the other songs here. Even I finally understand a bit more compelling lyrically than this one. But instrumentally,
Yeah.
the chord progressions that come in over, these same repeated I just want to party for you, etc. I'm not in love with it as a hook, but like the chords that come in underneath it and the different changes in just the sonic, landscape of the song over the course of about 5 minutes. It's the longest song here. It kind of does justify that length. I'm just not in love with Charlie's own vocal presence on the song, honestly. That holds it back for me a little bit, aside from that little bridge that you just mentioned,
Yeah.
which I love the
Yeah.
delivery there, but still the lyrics aren't great. But it's a case of an instrumental doing a hell of a lot of the heavy lifting and actually making it a song that's worth revisiting for me.
I'm just looking now who produced it, and yep, it's A.G. Cook.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. People have been really
There we
shitting
go.
on AG
So-
lately, and I don't know why, because, yeah, granted,
No, he's proved himself with this
yeah,
one.
he's been focusing on
again.
his work with Charlie because that's just where his career has led him. I mean, how is it any different from Danielle Hall deciding to make Caroline Polachek's music his kind of passion project in terms of production and focusing on that? How is it any different from that? I guess it's people who see Charli XCX as a much more commercial artist than albums like this prove that she really is, honestly. This is as left field
Yeah.
as anything you would have heard under the PC Music label back in the day, when it was more of a cult thing.
Definitely is. There's definitely a lot of experimental stuff on here. I think some of the most experimental Charlie's done.
Yeah, and it being really raw and rough around the edges, there's definitely moments on here where you can tell this was made in a very short period of time. I'm amazed we haven't brought up the track Detonate, because it's actually one of my favourite songs of hers in general. I love that song. It is a very nostalgic sounding song, but it has this incredible breakdown towards the end. Sometimes the songs sort of get deconstructed and sort of they recycle elements of the song, whether it be the vocals, they just resample them, or like earlier aspects of the instrumental get sort of reconstructed into something new, or like a long extended outro. The outro of Detonate does that. Click 2.0 does it by literally lifting material from her previous album instead of making it from scratch, because that song is built around a sample from the original Click song. So there's definitely a lot of moments where you can tell they had to cut corners and do things more quickly and not necessarily build it from the ground up. But considering that, they did an amazing job of making it work and still making it entertaining, and it's not to the detriment of the album to me.
I have to agree there.
But yeah, Detonate, I can't believe we almost didn't mention that one, because I love that song. That's one of my favourites here, alongside Forever and Claws and Pink Diamond and
And all of them.
and Click 2.0 and Anthems, and the closer Visions as well. I really like. I think that's one of the most emotionally compelling songs here. It really wraps up the theme and the concept of the album as neatly as it possibly could have been wrapped up. And it's just a really lovely song that descends into this nightmare rave trance soundscape at the end that sounds kind of intentionally garish. It's almost like going back to Pink Diamond again, where every song on this album is reflecting on the same, situation, but it's reflecting on it in a slightly different way. It's like a different emotional state for each song. Claws, for example, is about how much she loves her partner, who she's lucky enough to be staying with in this situation, and is just an ode to, having a loving relationship or someone to live with, because not to say it's looking down on anyone who's stuck on their own in this quarantine situation, but it's just, again, it's reflecting on the situation we're in a different emotional state. It's a caring song, it's a loving song, whereas Pink Diamond is an aggressive song lashing out. And I think the closing moments of Visions go back to that, and it just turns into this nightmare rave. But it's cool.
Yeah, there's no other way to describe it. Okay, so in summary, I feel like it's not unfair to say that Charli XCX has been the most proactive, certainly pop musician during recent times with this one. These songs would not exist otherwise. They've been spawned out of adversity or setback. She was definitely probably had different plans for the year than what's happened now, but she's done something with it. She's tapped into her own emotional core of how she's feeling right now and created something really special that I think will maybe almost like serve as sort of a time capsule of the time of how people felt.
Mm-hmm.
I really believe that. Putting that aside, just a ton of her best songs ever on here. Charli XCX fans of pop, just fans of current music, I think this is one to keep an eye on. I think I'll give it a 7.5 out of 10. I know I'm a cop-out with these pop 0.5 ratings. Why don't I settle on a 7 or an 8? It's probably closer to one of those, but I'm pretty comfortable giving it that.
I'm also going to give it a 7, but it's a very strong 7, possibly leaning on an 8 in future. There's moments
Come on,
on
7.5 again.
Well, yeah. I don't know if a 7 plus is technically the same thing. I don't know.
Well, when people say low to mid or mid to high, that's kind of the same thing as well.
Yeah.
Or strong to medium.
Well, I use this weird plus and minus system that no one else seems to use, unless they're using like a lettered grading system. But
oh yeah,
I don't know. It just works for me, I suppose. I feel very, very strongly about this being a 7 out of 10, and it could be an 8 maybe, so 7 plus, I'd say. There's definitely some moments where you can really tell that they made this in a short amount of time that are perhaps a little to its detriment, but then other moments that are just genius in how they cut corners but still manage to create great music, like I said with the outro of Detonate. Like Alex said, there's maybe some vocal moments that feel a little bit overbearing. There's maybe some lyrics here that are a bit too overly simplistic, water things down a tad. But I don't know, besides that, I'd say it's easily her best work so far, in my mind. I've been coming back to this album a hell of a lot lately, and I think I'm going to keep revisiting it even once we're out of all this madness. It's a quarantine album in the sense that it was conceived as a result of our quarantine, but it's more of a commentary on her emotional state than it is a commentary on the state of the world right now. And it's important to remember that when listening to it, I think. Otherwise, it might come across as a bit selfish, but I don't think it is personally. If people feel that way, that's fine, but I don't know. I feel like her feelings are very much valid and siphoned into great music for a great deal of this track list. It's a short one at 37 minutes, but that also makes the replay value of it go up a bit for me, because I like very brisk pop albums. Very few songs on here outstay their welcome. Like, for example, Pink Diamond, if this was a more commercial release, probably wouldn't be anywhere near as aggressive. But also, they probably would have said 2 minutes. That's way too short. You need to extend that out to a full-length pop song, and it probably would have ruined it. So I'm glad she had complete creative control here and got to work with all of these excellent PC adjacent artists like A.G. Cook and Umru and Danielle Hall, and especially Dylan Brady, who is just the GOAT for doing that claws beat, in my opinion. But yeah, it's just a really, really solid album. Like I said, she reflects on these different emotional states as a result of the situation she's in, and just really feel for her and want to party on to this album and imagine, we're all together in the setting that she's so desperate to be in, as evidenced by tracks like Anthems. I think Forever is probably my favourite pop song of the year, so if you're going to listen to anything from this, make it that song. But it works even better in the context of the album, I'd say. So yeah, really solid. It slows down a bit in the middle, but has an amazing start and amazing finish. So I highly recommend this album. I can't believe this even exists. And it's been getting a hell of a lot of praise, like more so than Charli, which I think is much deserved. And I hope she continues to do these more, not low-key, but just more creatively masterminded projects rather than, labels getting their grubby hands in and, forcing all of these
less
decisions
focus
on
group
her.
stuff.
Yeah. It's just this explosion of creative energy that's come out of a very, very bad situation. I don't necessarily subscribe to this idea that, like, for example, you need to be mentally ill to make emotionally compelling music, which is something that, or just art in general, which is something that some people seem to think, like, the more unhealthy you are, the better the art you make. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but like, yeah.
I've heard it in sort of a I told you so way, like where someone who is mentally ill, it's like it's no wonder they've made this art,
Yeah, it's just
in that sort of way.
It's entirely context sensitive, and it kind of seems like you're kind of like encouraging suffering on people, which is absolutely not what I am saying. But
it's not okay.
When I say that this has come out of a very bad situation, but this is what we need right now. Like, we need great art like this. Not just great art, but great art that is directly acknowledging and kind of, I guess, lashing out or being comforting in the face of adversity. And I just love it. Yeah, one of my favourite pop albums in a while.
Okay, thanks for listening to Busted Speakers, guys. If you like this review, subscribe. We've definitely got a lot of other ones on the way and on the channel. Check us out on Facebook and Twitter. We're on both of those. Yeah, see you guys.
Catch you later.